Good evening and welcome to the Ysleta Independent School District's meeting of the Board of Trustees. The meeting of the Board of Trustees is a meeting of the board that the public is allowed to attend. As provided Ysleta ISD policy, BED, we invite members of the public to make comments during citizens' input portion at the start of the meeting according to the instructions provided with the electronic posting notice of our meeting. Legally, the board may listen but may not enter into a discussion on matters in citizens' input. We remind everyone that this is a board meeting often attended by students and ask that we conduct ourselves in a manner that best represents the values and traditions of the Ysleta Independent School District. This meeting of the Board of Trustees is called to order at 6:01 p.m. We have a quorum with Mr. Shane Haggerty, Mr. Chris Hernandez, Mr. Mike Dwyer, Ms. Connie Woodruff, and myself. Ms. Catherine Lucero is unable to join us and is considered excused. At this time, Trustee Bustillos, would you please introduce our junior ROTC?
Yes, President Ochoa. It has become tradition to honor our nation at each of our board meetings by presenting the colors, reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, and posting the colors. The colors tonight are being presented by the Junior ROTC color guard from Riverside High School. Our color guard commander is Cadet Lizette Moreno. Our other color guard members are Cadet Juan Martinez, Cadet Diego Reyes, Cadet Vanessa Alacon, and the pledge leader is Cadet Amaris Reza. Will you please stand for the presentation of colors, the reciting of the Pledge of Allegiance, the Texas Pledge of Allegiance, and a moment of silence. Please remain standing until the cadets have departed.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now, please join me in the pledge to the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. De La Torre. We have one recognition for you this evening. At this time, we ask all trustees to please come to the front of the dais. Audience members, please remain seated until the recognition is complete. Thank you. Tonight's recognition honors the hardworking, dedicated, and talented J.M. Hanks High School Marching Band and Silhouettes Dance Team. After putting in superb performances at both the regional and area contests in October, the Knights were among only 2 high school marching bands in El Paso to qualify for this year's UIL 5A Area A State Marching Band Championships, which took place earlier this month in San Antonio. This marked the 8th year that the Knights have advanced to state, where they placed 33rd with their dazzling show, Neon Nights. It capped an exceptional marching band competition season that also saw the band become a 6-time grand champion winner at the NMSU Tournament of Bands competition, which took place the day before they left to state. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the leaders of the J.M. Hanks High School Marching Band, beginning with drum majors, Bailey Gates. Lily Arias. And Daniel Alvarez. Also, let's give a big round of applause to the Silhouettes Dance Team captains, Yasmin Alba, Danielle Castillo, Karina Barrios, and Brooke Von Kolb. They are accompanied by band director Horacio Gomez, assistant band directors James Cordova, Luis Ibarra, and Calvin Edwards, and principal Daniel Gutierrez. Let's hear it one more time for the Knights. This concludes our recognitions for this evening. Thank you.
Mr. Gomez, I want to thank you for everything you've done for Hanks for the last, since my girls were there. That was back in the 90s. You've all done an outstanding job year in and year out, and we're very proud, me, myself, being from Hanks, but I was also in the band way in my time. But I understand all the hard work that you have to do year-round. And I just want to say that you are appreciated. We recognize what you've accomplished, and we're very honored that you have come here to be with us tonight. And thank you so much. Ms. Mathewson, do we have citizens input this evening?
Good evening, President Ochoa. Yes, we do. We have Rosie Perez. Action item number 2, waivers.
Good evening, President Ochoa, esteemed trustees, and Superintendent Dr. De La Torre. My name is Rosie Perez, and I proudly serve the members of West Texas Alliance. On the agenda tonight is a request to TEA for class size waivers in pre-K through 4th grades over the 22-to-1 ratio. As we gather here today, it is important to reflect on the state of public education in our country, a system that should be the cornerstone of opportunity, equity, and success for all students. But the reality is that public education is in crisis. From underfunded schools to overwhelmed educators, the challenges are mounting and they demand our immediate attention and action. In the face of these financial constraints, many school districts are being forced to request waivers to increase class sizes. The idea behind these waivers is often to cut cost by packing more students into each classroom, but this solution is neither sustainable nor effective. While it may seem like a temporary fix, it carries significant long-term consequences that undermine the quality of education our children receive. Large class sizes directly affect the quality of education. When classrooms are overcrowded, teachers have less time and fewer resources to devote to each individual student. Every child's learning needs are different, but when a teacher is responsible for even more students, personalized attention becomes nearly impossible. In an overcrowded classroom, students fall through the cracks. They struggle to keep up, and the individualized support that so many need is simply unavailable. But the consequences don't stop there. The increase in class sizes impacts teacher morale and ultimately teacher retention. Educators enter the profession because they want to make a difference. But when faced with overcrowded classrooms, mounting administrative tasks, and limited resources, many teachers find themselves feeling overwhelmed and burned out. It's not just the teaching itself that becomes more challenging, but also the never-ending paperwork, the added responsibilities, and the constant pressure to do more with less. For many teachers, the dream of making a meaningful impact turns into a daily battle against the clock and the resources they lack. And let's not forget that when teacher morale is low, recruitment becomes even harder. We are already facing a teacher shortage across the nation, and the increasing demands on educators are making it harder to attract new talent. If we continue to allow class sizes to balloon, we will only deepen the teacher shortage, leave our schools with unfilled positions and overworked staff. This cycle that will only harm students, especially those who are most in need of support. So while the waiver request to increase class sizes may seem like a necessary step in the short term, we must not allow this practice to become the norm. The evidence is clear. Large class sizes diminish the quality of education for students, reduce the effectiveness of teachers, and undermine the long-term success of our education system. But there is hope. We must advocate for more sustainable solutions that prioritize the needs of both students and educators. We must also recognize the value of educators. They are not just employees, they are the backbone of our society's future. When we invest in teachers, we invest in our children's future. We need to support teachers with reasonable class sizes, sufficient resources, and a work environment that allows them to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mathewson. Any more?
No, sir, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll now proceed to our next stage, which is our board workshop. Dr. De La Torre, do we have any presentations this evening?
Yes, President Ochoa, members of the board, guests, this evening we have our 2024 Annual Financial and Compliance Report presentation by Dr. Scott Scarborough from Hankins YISD.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Scott Scarborough. I am with the accounting firm of Hankins YISD. We are your new external independent auditors, and very much appreciate the opportunity to be of service to Ysleta School District. We are located in Denton, Houston, Austin, Amarillo, and I'm happy to report We have now opened an office in El Paso as part of our larger strategic plan to have an office in each of the 6 major regions of Texas. So we're pleased to join your community and appreciate the opportunity to do that. You opened the door for us to be able to do that, and very much appreciate it. Our firm began in 1965. We audit 52 school districts in the state of Texas, which gives us kind of a unique opportunity to follow the trends and to see what's happening across the board and share best practices. We've been auditing Texas school districts for 45 years, but again, this is our first year to audit Ysleta Independent School District. All of these 52 school districts that we work with hire us to essentially do 3 things. 1, to audit the district's annual financial statements. 2, to help the school district prepare the significant document that has to be submitted to the TEA by the end of November. And then thirdly, for those school districts that have federal expenditures that exceed $750,000 in a year, we're also required to audit your major grant programs. So these are the 3 services that we have provided you this year. The audit process is a long process. It starts before the end of your fiscal year. We do a significant planning process, risk assessment process. We come out to the school district to do some interim test work, knowing that time is always of the essence at the end of the year, so we try to do as much of the work as we can before year end. But after year end, when the accounting staff says they're ready, we come in, we begin our year end field work, and then when we get comfortable with the numbers, believing that they're materially correct, we then move into report preparation stage. And then if we have any findings in a particular year, we're also obligated to come back the following year and to do some follow-up work and testing and reporting around previous year findings. So that's an overview of the audit process itself. Let's talk a little bit about the results for this year. Happy to report that we had clean opinions on all of the areas that we're expected to test. What does that mean? What that means is that we have issued an opinion that your financial statements are materially correct, that we found no findings of grant non-compliance, and that your internal controls were adequate. So we're happy to report that. Congratulations to you and to your financial staff for that achievement. And I did want to say at this point, express my appreciation to the staff. Anytime you bring in a new accounting firm, it's both taxing on the existing staff and on the accounting firm itself because of the significant learning curve to learn about a new school district, especially a school district of this size. And we were blessed to work with some wonderful people that you know well, but we got to know for the first time. And we just want to express to you our respect for these people and appreciation for the hard work that they did for us in trying to get this work done. Part of our responsibilities to you as the board are to communicate certain required communications. We have to conduct our audit in accordance with national standards. They're referred to as generally accepted auditing standards. So part of those standards require us to say, okay, well, what did you focus on when you did your testing of our financial statements? Well, we focused on making sure that all of your cash account and investment accounts existed. We focused on ensuring that the amount of receivables that you were carrying on your books were actually collectible. We did testing to ensure that your accounts payable were complete and not missing significant liabilities at year end. We did testing to ensure that your lease transactions and any software licenses were properly accounted for in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We spend significant time getting to understand the assumptions and the assessments that are made by the teachers' retirement system and their actuaries to record properly this district's pension liability and retiree health care, OPEB liability at year end. And then, of course, we're also required to take a look at your internal controls around two areas: financial reporting and grant compliance. Also required to communicate to you that we had no disagreements with management during the course of our audit, that we received all of the information that we requested, that we're not aware of any consultations that occurred to other accounting firms trying to seek a second opinion on an accounting principle that we may have discussed, that all the adjusting journal entries that we recommended to the district that they posted. And we're also required to let you know that probably the most significant, all financial statements have some estimates in the balance sheets and income statements. And school districts are no exception. And probably the most significant estimates are around the actuarial assumptions to determine your annual pension liability. And so that's the reason why the TRS hires an outside actuarial firm each year to reassess those assumptions, and those assumptions change. I think for those who are aware of the difficulty of estimating this liability, the actuaries are trying to estimate what investment earnings are going to be over time. They're trying to estimate what healthcare trend costs are going to be over time. They're estimating mortality rates. There's just a number of factors that go into estimating what is the district's current liability around pension and retiree health care benefits. So we're required to communicate to you that your financial statements do include estimates like all Texas public school districts, and the most significant ones are around this pension and post-retirement benefits. All of you should have received the copy of the annual financial report. With your permission, I'll give you just a quick kind of overview of that document. Some of you may have seen these types of reports many times during your tenure on the board. Others, you may be seeing something like this for the first time. If I can get you to turn to the table of contents on page 3 or page 1. I just kind of want to walk you through what you will find in a document like this. The first thing that I would point out is the independent auditor's report. That is where, on our letterhead, we are expressing our conclusion to you that your financial statements are materially correct. Now notice that we use that word materially correct. That's kind of important in the accounting world. We don't say absolutely correct, because to be able to express an opinion that it would be absolutely correct would require us to test everything. And no one could afford an audit that would require someone to test everything. So we use sampling techniques, we use risk analysis to decide what to test. And the industry allows us then to conclude, based on that testing, that these statements are materially correct, that an average user of these reports can look at the numbers, make decisions, and rely on those numbers. The other thing that I would point out is governmental entities are actually required to present two types of financial statements in their annual financial report. One type of financial statement starts on page 19. Those are your government-wide financial statements. Those are the financial statements most like a for-profit company. So if you are businessmen and women on the board, you're accustomed to seeing a balance sheet, an income statement of all the financial operations of a particular entity. You're accustomed to seeing current assets, current liabilities, long-term assets, long-term liabilities, and then the difference being some type of an equity account. So the government-wide financial statements on page 19 and 20 is the closest to that for a governmental entity. However, beginning on page 22, you have fund financial statements. This is how districts and governmental entities actually operate themselves, as you know. They separate monies into a general fund or to a debt service fund or to a capital projects fund or to a special revenue fund that puts monies that have certain restrictions on them in different funds so that that money can be tracked in accordance with those restrictions. What's significantly different, however, about these fund financial statements is that there are no long-term assets or long-term liabilities in the fund financial statements, because the focus of these financial statements is on current resources. Do we have enough money to pay our current bills? So the focus of these financial statements are very different. Government-wide gives you that total look, similar to what a business entity would do. The fund-level financial statements, on the other hand, are such that it helps the district comply with all of its external restrictions and is really focused on just, do we have the funds necessary to pay our current bills? The other thing that I would point out to you is that beginning on page 74, you have what's called combining statements, so that if you're interested in a particular individual fund, you'll find each fund listed there so that you can look at a particular fund. There's no aggregation. This is the ultimate level of detail, especially the exhibits H1 and H2. And then lastly, I want to point out that beginning on page, on page 105 is the beginning of that section where we identify all of the federal grant monies that you've received during the year. And that's the section of the report that will include our opinions and our reports to you on the testing that we performed and any findings that we may have had. And of course, as I communicated with you earlier, we did not have any findings in those areas. We always like to just kind of look at the district as a whole and take a few snapshots over time. This is just a quick look at what your general fund balance has been over the last 5 years. We just keep track of this just to get a sense of the general health. The TEA would ideally love to see every school district maintain about 75 days of expenses in fund balance. Many school districts are struggling to do that right now. But as a school district trustee and an administrator, this is probably the metric that people pay most attention to. What is our general fund balance? This is your unrestricted money for your core operations, so people tend to watch this number pretty carefully. We always like to just look and see the distribution of your expenses. What percentage is going to instruction versus debt service versus facilities management, so we can look to see if anything kind of looks out of ordinary. And then we always like to talk about this pension and OPEB liability because it's not reflected in the fund financial statements because that, again, there are no long-term assets or long-term liabilities in the fund financial statements, but you will see these liabilities presented in the government-wide financial statements. These are the pension liabilities that eventually the district will need to fund for benefits that employees have already earned given their current service. And you can see the volatility of that estimate from year to year. At the end of each audit, and especially at the end of a first-time audit, we always try to sit down with management and kind of debrief on, okay, how did things go? How can we do better in the future? And so when we sit down with your financial management team at the end of this audit, we will probably discuss with them our hope that we can involve internal audit and work more closely with them in the conduct of your annual financial statement audit each year. I had the benefit in my career of kind of working on both sides of this coin. For 5 years, I was an audit manager with the University of Texas System as an internal auditor. For many years, I've served as an external auditor, and I've just seen the wonderful synergy that can result if both groups are working together to look at the financial controls around financial reporting and grants management and the quality of the audit and the timeliness of the audit improves if both groups work well together. So we will, at the appropriate time, visit with your team and see whether or not it's possible to include some time in asking the Internal Audit Department to join us in our audit. The other thing that I'll mention to your financial management team at the end of the audit is just the increasing level of scrutiny around internal controls by the Office of Inspector General's office at the federal government level. When you accept federal funds and when you accept state grant funds, there is a requirement that the district put in internal controls over financial reporting and over major program grant compliance that satisfies a standard known as the COSO standard or the Green Book standard. The COSO standard is more of a private enterprise standard of internal control that people use to test and to opine on internal controls. The Green Book is kind of the federal government's version of the COSO standards. And what we have found in the Office of Inspector General's audits of accounting firms is that when they look at our working papers, they're increasingly becoming kind of critical of the documentation that the district has provided to us and the information that we have put together. So we'll have a conversation with your team to say, let's look at some best practices that other governmental entities have put in place to shore up that documentation. And I think that will serve everyone better and kind of reduce the risk of having a finding in this area. So that's my overview of our first year at Ysleta Independent School District. Again, we are thankful for the opportunity to be here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can answer at this time.
I want to thank you for coming in tonight and doing your presentation. This is one of the requirements for us to have this report filed at the end of this month, is what I understand.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. My question is, why was this delayed so much that we received it yesterday right before the board meeting?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think part of it is just kind of part of that first year process of getting the learning curve was significant, probably put us behind the 8 ball a little bit. As you know, you had a few transitions in your financial team, a pretty significant member who and I'm sure you thought a whole lot of, had a great opportunity. That probably slowed us down a couple of days. But I think the question that you ask is probably the most important thing, and that is we just need to understand what your expectation is, and then we need to, as part of our debriefing of this first year audit, put together a calendar to make sure we get it to you when you would like. I was telling folks earlier, we serve 52 school districts, and each board has a slightly different expectation of when they would like the information, how they would like it. Would they like it presented in a small committee and then the board, or just always to the full board? So we just need to work with your team and make sure we understand what you would like to occur, and then put together a calendar to make sure we do that next year.
Well, this board expects to have it at least, let's say, by last week on Thursday. Because
Okay.
it's 117 pages.
Yes, sir.
And we would certainly like to review it and have our questions ready for the workshop
Okay.
that's coming up. This puts us behind on us having the opportunity to review, which is really the basis for this board to be here, is the preview of the operation financially of the district.
Right.
And having this given to us yesterday, I think, is not something that I would like to see again. I hope that you don't do this with the other 52 or 51 districts, because it's really puts the board behind the 8 ball on trying to make a decision, which is coming up later today. I hope you understand that.
We do.
I just, I think that's like, I was just going through this. There's questions that certainly all of us would like to ask as to some of this report. One of them, like in page 15, Local taxes revenues decreased due to a compressed tax rate. State foundation revenue increased to compensate for the additional compressed tax rate. Other items that affected the district fiscal 2024 activities were so and so on. And this is part of the, I think that would have been great for us to have a one-on-one discussion. What does this mean? We're not accountants, for sure.
Right.
At least none of us are. We have different backgrounds, but I'm just saying that puts us at a disadvantage, which I really didn't appreciate having it delivered to us at 12:30 yesterday afternoon.
So ideally, you would like it at least a week ahead of time.
We normally have a week ahead of time to
Okay.
review this board is very meticulous when they receive these reports, and we're not experts on it, but we can certainly ask somebody else as to what's the content of these reports in order for us to be better informed so we can make a decision when it comes down to accepting anything that's presented to us. But
Understood.
that's what I have to say. If anybody else has anything to say? Yes, sir.
I have a couple of questions. One, welcome to El Paso. It's nice to know that you opened up shop here. I know it's within the Ysleta School District boundaries where you opened up shop.
Yes.
My question is, I guess, terminology. Like on page 87, is unrestricted net position the same as fund balance?
That's a great question. So that term net position is equivalent to the term fund balance. The reason they use a different term, because that signals you, when you hear the word net position, that we're talking about the government-wide financial statements. When you hear the term fund balance, we're talking about the fund level financial statements. So that's why they use different terms. Now, whether or not that's successful, it was supposed to make it more simple, but a lot of times it's confusing to people. But you can essentially think of it as the fund balance at the government-wide level. So assets minus liabilities equals fund balance at the fund level. Assets minus liabilities equals net position in the government-wide financial statements.
So that brings up a second question, I guess, regarding fund balance. I forget what page it was on. But it looked like you combined the two at the bottom of the sheet. Like there was a certain number of liabilities, a certain number of funds remaining, and it looked like the two were put together, or the total amount spent. Should I have to find it? But I guess going back to my first question, so unrestricted net position for health insurance, I see 8.4 million, meaning that we have 8.4 million in the bank.
Not necessarily. It'd be assets minus liabilities equals fund balance or net position. So it doesn't equate, fund balance doesn't equate to what you have in the bank. What you have in the bank is simply one of your assets in that calculation, if that makes sense.
What would be a good way to determine?
If it's a fund that only has assets of cash, the answer would be yes.
Because I see total assets, total liabilities. If I subtract the two, I get that total net
Yes,
position.
sir. Yes, sir.
So is that what we have available?
At the end of the fiscal year, yes, sir.
And then I did find that other one. It's total liabilities and total fund balances. They're two separate numbers, and liability to me sounds like that's something that you have to pay. And a fund balance would be something that we have remaining, but they add the two together, total liabilities and fund balances at the bottom of the sheet.
Right. If you add the total liabilities and the fund balance, that should equal the total assets of that fund. So total assets equals liabilities plus fund balance.
So a liability isn't necessarily a bill, it's
A liability could be a bill, an accounts payable. It could be an accrued liability, like withholding payroll taxes that haven't been remitted to the government yet. So there's different kinds of liabilities, but it certainly would include bills to be paid.
I guess my question is, why would you add the two?
Let's see, what page are you looking at?
78, 79?
78. All right, let's look at
So if
that.
we look at the campus activity funds, I see where you say total assets, which equals total liabilities and fund balances. But why would a liability be lumped into an asset?
Okay, so I'm on page 78 and 79. Do you mind asking that question one more time now that I'm there?
So we look at campus activity funds, we can see total assets is 1.7 million. Total liabilities is about 300,000. And total fund balance is 1.4.
Correct.
So you add 1.4 plus 3, you get 1.7. But why would you add something that's considered a liability to create?
That's a
total
great
assets?
question. Let's talk about Campus Act. So what this is saying is 1.7 million in cash. It's saying you've got $73,000 of bills to be paid out of that cash. It's saying that you've got, due to other funds, so that campus activity owes other funds $220,000. So the difference between what it has in cash minus what it owes to others is the fund balance. Assets minus liabilities equals fund balance. It's kind of like, think if in the for-profit world, it would be the equity, the owner's equity of a company. In the governmental world, we don't use the term owner's equity because there are no owners. This serves the public, so we call it fund balance.
I think I see what you mean.
Yeah.
So cash on hand, as far as this report goes, is 1.7 because we haven't paid the 300
In the
yet.
campus activity funds, right. In the cash on the books at year end is 1.7 million for your campus activity funds.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else questions? Comments? Okay. I do want you to look at page 57.
Okay.
There's a small paragraph on healthcare, but it has a big impact on our expenditures. That's the healthcare. That's the district contributed $592.83 per month per employee.
Right.
Now, when you were looking at for the year to come, did you take into consideration what this impact would have as far as our financial standing?
So typically, our job primarily is just to verify the current year. Now, that doesn't mean that when we look at these numbers, we don't intuitively think, how does this compare to other school districts? The only thought that I had when I saw this was the 592 is probably the highest that I've seen of any school district that we work with. That number is usually around $300. So you're doing significantly more for your employees than most school districts are.
And I think that has been a reason that we have done that is because even though you can't give the raises that we want to, we kind of try to compensate for them not having that expenditure year in and year out for healthcare. And I was just wondering because right now it's $592.83 per month, but come next year with everything going up, it's probably going to be even more expensive.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the general tone for most of the school districts that we work with is the next few years are going to be tough. Probably half of our school districts adopted deficit budgets for this year. Something that the TEA has noted. But you probably follow that issue even more so than we do. We're focused on testing numbers and reporting on what we're testing, and you're looking more forward than we are typically in the nature of our work.
There's another, I have just scanning it was a couple of questions, but I'm not going to go into each one of them. One of them that I do want you to answer is on page 39, and that's on capital assets, where you're saying that includes property, plant, equipment, and infrastructure assets are reported in the applicable government or business type activities columns, whatever. So I saw land improvements, buildings and improvements, furniture and equipment, vehicles, right? on our assets, maybe you can answer that, Ms. Is that also the properties that have been vacated that are still owned by the taxpayers of Ysleta?
Yes, sir. As long as they remain in our inventory, they remain in our assets. So yes.
And they are classified as building and improvements? Or where would they come in?
Yes, sir. They would be both. So we have building along with any improvements we've made to the building, and then we would have real property. Then all of that would be listed in the government-wide financial statements under the long-term capital assets.
And you provided that information to this gentleman?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that we are covered as far as our assets for all these properties that we are no longer, that we have for sale because of the closure of some of these schools because of the downsizing.
Right.
Okay, that's my last question. There are more that I would have liked to ask, but at this time, because of the, have to expedite this before November 27th, I believe. So it has to be filed with TEA. If there's no other questions, thank you, sir, for tonight.
Thank you, appreciate it.
At this time, we will now review the discussed agenda items as listed in the posted notice of the regular meeting of the Ysleta ISD Board of Trustees for November 13, 2024, and related recommended motions with the superintendent and executive cabinet, and receive responses to questions and/or requests for additional information through the superintendent in preparation for deliberation and action on said items at the November 13, 2024 regular Board of Trustees meetings. Please stop me if you have any questions or if you wish to pull an item. Consent items. Number 1, Board of Trustees Workshop and Regular Board Meeting, October 16, 2024, 6 p.m. Consent item number 2, accept monthly financial statements and bond project report for September 2024. Number 3, consent item is accept the annual report of cooperative purchasing fees. Now following is the action items. Number 1, cast allotted votes for nominee of choice in the election of the Board of Directors for the El Paso Central Appraisal District, CAD, for a director position with a 3-year term and related resolution. Number 2, action item is request to the Texas Education Agency for class size waivers. Action item number 3, school district teaching permit for Chinese teacher at Alicia R. Chacon International School. Number 4, accept the annual financial and compliance report for the year end June 30th, 2024. The order of the agenda has been approved. May I have an electronic motion on the consent agenda items listed on the agenda as recommended by the administration? Please cast your, may I have a,
Mr. President,
yes, please.
I move to approve the consent agenda items listed on this agenda as recommended by administration.
We have a motion by Ms. Woodruff. It's been seconded by Mr. Chris Hernandez. Please cast your votes.
Oh, you gotta get on the agenda. Here you go.
Votes have been cast. Results are 6 in favor, none opposed. All right. Now we'll consider our action items. Number 1 is cast allotted votes for nominees of choice in the election of the Board of Directors for the El Paso Central Appraisal District CAD for the director position with a 3-year term and related resolutions. Is there any discussion? No discussions. May I have a motion? Ms. Woodruff.
Mr. President, I move to cast all 453 allotted votes in favor of Trustee Shane Haggerty in the CAD Board of Directors election for a 3-year term, starting January 1st, 2025, ending December 31st, 2027, and approve the related resolution as presented.
Thank you. We have a second by Mr. Chris Hernandez. Please cast your votes. Votes have been cast. The results are 6 in favor, none opposed. Congratulations. Action item number 2, request to the Texas Education Agency for class size waiver. Is there any discussion?
Yes. When we're talking, as of now, it's 22-1. What numbers are we looking at as far as increasing the size of these classes?
Mr. President, Dr. De La Torre, Board of Trustees, we're looking to increase 5 classes with 1 student. Now, in the event that there was a second or third student that came into the classroom that has a waiver, we would automatically put a substitute teacher in the classroom with the teacher upon the teacher's agreement. There are times where our classroom teachers prefer not to have a sub in the classroom, but we definitely leave that up to them.
Thank you.
And I would like to note that 2 of the classes that were on a waiver that we approved a couple of months ago have since been taken off of the waiver because it's no longer necessary.
I have one question also.
Yes, ma'am.
So I know that when we discussed this a couple of years ago, actually, about adding, you also said that you do take in consideration the load of the teacher, the kind of class she might have at the time, because we do know that sometimes you get a little harder class than another class, and I'm just wondering, that's still true, right?
100%, absolutely. So if we know that a classroom teacher has some significant behavior concerns in his or her classroom, we certainly would not put the waiver in that particular classroom. We definitely have to take that into consideration.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
What would be the consequence if this item was not approved today?
What we would have to do is open a subsequent classroom setting for the 1 additional student, and we would put a long-term substitute teacher in that classroom until we could secure a teacher. Right now, the problem is that there's not a significant amount of teachers that are certified that are viable for the classroom.
So the classroom right now has 22, we're looking at 23 students.
Yes, sir.
And then that classroom will be divided into 12 and 11 students between 2 teachers?
We could certainly do it that way, uh-huh.
You said that, well, I heard during public comment that we're understaffed on teachers. Is that true?
Right now, sir, we have the lowest number of teacher vacancies in the city. We have approximately 7 elementary positions, and I believe we have 12 secondary positions, but we have since hired some residents that will graduate from UTEP at the end of December to fill those vacancies.
Okay, so there's not like there's viable applicants waiting to fill these positions?
No, sir, not at this current time. In the past, we've had 20 to 30 applicants for every 1 teacher position. Now we're lucky if we get 5 to 7. And oftentimes, some of those applicants come with sanctions on their certifications, and we have to take that into consideration, even if they are certified.
What would be an example of a sanction?
You could be sanctioned for drug use. You could be sanctioned for injuring a child at some point. It
Okay.
could be anything of that nature that would be a required report to the State Board of Education certification.
And this waiver would not be for more than 3 students? Because the rationale says with classes with 1 to 3 students.
Absolutely. So let's say that we got a 4th student, and that would take that class to 25. We would, or 26, we would definitely not do that. At that point, we would split the classes, or we would overflow to a neighboring elementary school.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Now, these 5 classrooms that we're talking about, these are spread out throughout the district, is that correct?
Yes, sir. There would be one at Eastwood Heights Elementary, one at Desert Air Elementary, one at Parkland Pre-K, one at Riverside Elementary, and one at REL Washington.
Okay. Any other questions? If no further discussion, may I have an electronic motion? Mr. Hernandez.
Yes, Mr. President, I move to approve the district's submission to the Texas Education Agency for Class size waivers to allow certain pre-K through 4th grade classes to exceed the 22-to-1 ratio.
We have a second by Mr. Carlos Bustillos. Please cast your votes. All votes have been cast. The results are 5 in favor, 1 opposed. Action item number 3. School district teaching permit for Chinese teacher at Alicia R. Chacon International School. Is there any discussion? No further discussion. May I have an electronic motion? Mr. Bustillos.
Mr. President, I move to approve the insurance of the district teaching permit for EC 12 Chinese for Yang Yin Iris Xin, Chinese teacher at Alicia Chacon International School.
Thank you. We have a second by Mr. Cruz Hernandez. Please cast your votes. All votes have been cast. The results are 6 in favor, none opposed. Action item number 4, accept the annual financial and compliance report for the year ended June 30th, 2024. Is there any discussion? With no further discussion, may I have an electronic motion? Ms. Woodruff.
Mr. President, I move to accept the annual financial compliance report with independent auditor's report for the year ended June 30th, 2024.
Thank you. We have a second by Mr. Bustillos. Please cast your electronic votes. All votes have been cast. The results are 6 in favor, none opposed. Thank you. Now we shall move into the closed session portion of our board meeting. The Board of Trustees has determined that a closed meeting of the Board of Trustees is required to discuss the items set forth in the posted agenda for this date. Such closed meeting is authorized by the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Section 551.001, including but not limited to the sections and purposes covered by the following sections of the Texas Government Code 551.071, 72, 73, 74, 76, 82, 127, 821, 83, 84, 87, and 89. Should any final action, decision, or vote be required with regard to any matter considered in the closed session, the final action, decision, or vote shall be in the open meeting or at a subsequent public meeting with notice. At this time, the board will now go into closed session in the Rio Grande Room at 7:01 PM. I reconvene this meeting of the Board of Trustees with Shane Haggerty, Chris Hernandez, Charlie Bustillos, Mike Dwyer, Connie Woodruff, and myself at 8:02 p.m. Action items after closed session is number 1 is to consider approval of TEA District Vulnerability Assessment. Do we have any discussion? Well, we can't, but may I have a motion? Mr. Bustillos.
Mr. President, I move to approve the TA District Vulnerability Assessment as discussed in closed session.
Thank you. We have a second by Ms. Woodruff. Please cast your electronic votes. Votes have been cast. Results are 6 in favor, none opposed. The second item after closed session is number 2, consider approval of district-wide intruder detection audit report findings. May I have a motion? Mr. Haggerty.
I move to approve the district-wide intruder detection audit report findings as discussed in closed session, and would like to add that I found the audit report findings to be extremely impressive, and I want to thank Ms. Lindley and her whole team for everything that you guys have been doing to make sure our students stay safe.
Thank you. We have a second by Ms. Woodruff. Please cast your electronic votes. All votes have been cast. Results are 6 in favor, none opposed. If there's no other discussion or comment, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Adjourn.